The 33 banned cards in Pauper are either overpowered, extremely toxic to play, or politically incorrect. Today we will discuss why they are banned and which could possibly be unbanned in the current Pauper meta. Starting with Aarakocra Sneak, introduced in Commander Legends. It's a 4 mana, 1/4 flyer that lets you take the initiative when it enters the battlefield. While it was released on paper on June 10, 2022, it was announced to be released on MTGO on September 6, and players were skeptical about how good the mechanic would be for the format. Alongside Underdark Explorer, Vicious Battlerager, and Stirring Bard, Aarakocra Sneak was banned just a few weeks later on September 19th, since online players claimed that it was broken by essentially winning games on turn 1 by getting access to unmatched card advantage, with the help of right cards like Rite of Flame and Dark Ritual. The only cards left with the keyword on them are the ones that don't share any colors of the cards I just mentioned and see sporadic play from time to time in mid-tier decks. Next on the list is Arcum's Astrolabe, a 1 mana artifact that can serve as a cantrip. In addition, you can pay 1 snow mana to filter it for any other color, similar to Prophetic Prism, which, spoiler alert, is also banned. Its Enter the Battlefield ability, paired with cards like Glint Hawk and Sky Fissure that could bounce it to hand, can generate tons of value for very cheap mana investment. On top of that, you have access to pretty much every other color and some archetypes that abuse it in that regard, like 5-color Tron decks and familiars that can exploit it even further with Ghostly Flicker and Archimancer to create loops that draw multiple cards. Prophetic Prism is a 2 mana artifact that lets you draw a card when it enters the battlefield, and it was part of Pauper for a long time. It was not as powerful as Arcum's Astrolabe, as 1 mana really makes the difference, but the effect was similar. Again, Tron decks abused it as they had the perfect artifact spell to fix their mana issues, leading to tedious games. Atog was a symbol of freedom, a creature loved by many but hated by the PFP, as they claimed it to be responsible for multiple non-games, and with a decent density of artifacts on the battlefield, players could use Fling or Temur Battle Rage to close games. However, this creature was legal in the format from the beginning. It was not until bridges were introduced that it was pointed out as a problem and eventually banned. After the Atog ban, Affinity strategies switched from winning games with a big creature to assembling a board that can get sacrificed to drain your opponents with Disciple of the Vault. This 1 black mana 1/1 creature will make the target opponent lose 1 life whenever an artifact is put from the battlefield to the graveyard. The PFP didn't like this and decided to ban this card and keep bridges alive so that Wildfire keeps breathing. Next, we got Bonder's Ornament, a mana rock for 3 mana that can draw you a card if you pay 4 mana and tap it. While it does not seem like much at first, it was often used in Tron strategies to fix their mana and abuse its card draw ability, as mana is not an issue on those decks. I personally like it in mid-range decks to battle the Monarch and Faeries, but its sins were greater than the archetypes it enabled. Cloud Faeries is a 2 mana 1/1 flyer that has cycling, but more importantly, it lets you untap 2 lands when it enters the battlefield. Why is this important? Simply because you can pair it with others like Sunscape Familiar, that reduces spell cost, and along with Ghostly Flicker and Archaeomancer, you can indefinitely produce mana to target later other creatures like Seagate Oracle, to find a finisher like Sage's Road Denizen. While that's basically the same win condition that the current Familiars build has, this card made it easier to do, but I wonder how it fares in the current Pauper meta, as Lava Dart does exist. Speaking of broken cards, have you ever heard of All That Glitters? A card that gives +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment on your side of the field? Well, meet its older brother Cranial Plating, an equipment that offers +1/+0 for each artifact you control to a creature, and it costs just 1 mere mana to equip and 2 black if you want to do it at instant speed. The problem comes in the latter, as you can swing with everything and switch targets to the creature that is not blocked. Chatterstorm is a 2 mana sorcery spell that creates a 1/1 green squirrel token when it resolves, and more importantly, it has Storm. Most cards with this ability are banned in Pauper for a good reason. Pauper has the same cards that enable Storm decks in Legacy, like Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, and Rite of Flame, and it's very easy to get turn 2 kills with it alongside First Day of Class to give it haste. Empty the Warrens, on the other hand, is a similar card that costs 2 more mana, but it adds twice the amount of tokens than Chatterstorm. The next Storm card banned from Pauper deals 1 damage to any target for 2 mana. While it would require a bigger Storm to pull it off, it also doesn't require any other additional card to make a 1-turn kill combo, as in Chatterstorm or Empty the Warrens, which both need Impact Tremors or First Day of Class. Another card with Storm that is also banned is Temporal Fissure, a 5 mana sorcery that can return any permanent to its owner's hand. At the time, Cloud Faeries were still legal in the format, and it enabled casting multiple spells a turn, and with it, you could return an entire board. Technically, you can do something similar with the right setup of Snaps and Archaeomancers, but at least lands are safe. Last but not least, the final card with Storm that is banned is Galvanic Relay, a card that exiles the top card of your library, and you can play it until your next turn. How it works is that you storm off on a turn, and the next one you aim for a bigger storm that can lead to ending the game. Honestly, this card was not as problematic without the other payoffs, but I guess it rubbed the wrong way to someone on the PFP who decided to get rid of it. Fall from Favor is a 3-mana enchantment that taps a creature when it enters the battlefield, and it will remain tapped as long as you are the Monarch. It also grants you the Monarch, an emblem that will let you draw a card at the end of your turn for as long as you have it. While stun effects are usually bad in Pauper, this one turned out to be great as it was the only decent removal spell on blue, and because it taps the creature that could hit your life points, while also giving you an ability that rewards you for not being dealt combat damage. Players were also seen using it on their creatures just to access the emblem and start gaining the raw card advantage if the opponents can attack through the board, or don't have creatures in play yet to steal it. Gitaxian Probe is a 1 Phyrexian mana common that lets you look at your opponent's hand and draws you a card. Alongside Gush and Daze, these 3 cards were banned from Pauper at once, as by that time, blue decks were superior to pretty much every other deck in the meta. And with the recent addition to Augur of Bolas to the format, these 3 cards drastically started to dominate Pauper. Next we have Frantic Search, a 3-mana instant that lets you draw 2 cards and untap 3 lands. This ban is intended to prevent cards from Pauper from being played essentially for free, leading to just replacing card quantity with card quality. This is why Peregrine Drake is also banned. It's a 5-mana 2/3 flyer that lets you untap 5 lands when it enters the battlefield. While it's a bit more expensive than the other cards, it's almost as good as casting it for free. Now, all of these cards would fit in a deck featuring High Tide, a 1 blue mana instant that doubles the amount of blue mana islands can add until the end of the turn. However, this is also another card banned from Pauper, as the theory implied that it would enable blue decks to amass insane amounts of mana. Still, I could see it in mono-blue poison storm decks if it was legal. Cloudpost is a land that adds 1 colorless mana for each other, locus in play. One of these lands is not a problem, but 2 would add 2 mana by turn 3 and so on. Alongside Glimmerpost, a land that gains life for each other locus in play. These 2 pose a major threat in Pauper and surprisingly in Modern, where it's also banned. Another land that is also banned in Pauper is Mystic Sanctuary, an island that lets you put an instant or a sorcery on top of your library from the graveyard if you control 3 or more islands. The problem with this one was that people often abused it with loops that involved cards we already discussed, making me think that we should ban those instead of the other ones that would likely just be niche in some decks. Even other cards that we already discussed, like Cloud Faeries and Peregrine Drake, would be okay to be around if it was not for the loops that they enable, thanks to cards like Ghostly Flicker or Ephemerate into a Mnemonic Wall or Archaeomancer. My verdict? I approve, mostly because I want to play Thunderous Rat with it. Hymn to Tourach is a 2 black mana sorcery that makes your opponent discard 2 cards at random from their hand. Sinkhole is another similar sorcery that allows you to destroy any target land. Both of these cards were preemptively banned with the format unification, as what I see claimed they were unfun cards to play against. And while that is true, I can think of some other cards that fit the role and are Pauper legal. Invigorate is a 3-mana instant spell that gives +4/+4 to a creature. However, if you let your opponent gain 3 lives and control a forest, you can play it for free. As you can imagine, the fear of this card being legal in the format is thanks to the presence of cheap infect creatures that can end games from one turn to another. Modern Horizons 2 introduced many game-changing cards, including Sojourner's Companion, a 7-mana 4/4 like Mere Enforcer that can fetch artifact lands for 2 mana. While that can lead to very explosive starts, it also enables flooding the board with Thopters in the blink of an eye with the help of Ethereum Spinner. Treasure Cruise is an 8-mana sorcery spell that lets you draw 3 cards. However, it has Delve, which enables you to remove cards from your graveyard to help pay its mana cost. While it's true that it's banned in every other Eternal format, what does have, and Pauper does not, is access to fetch lands that can easily add extra cards to the graveyard when needed. Monastery Swiftspear has been a powerhouse in other formats like Modern and Pioneer, where it can pressure your opponents very early and deal tons of damage when not answered. In Pauper's case, it was sure from day one of its release that it would cause trouble. Still, I think the format has stayed relatively the same, even after its banning. Now, I mentioned that there are 2 cards in Pauper that are banned for an entirely different reason than the ones we've just seen until now. In June 2020, WotC announced that they were retiring from the game cards for depicting racism in either their art, name, or rules text. These are the cards that are technically legal in the format, but for the above reason are banned from Pauper.